Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to the Woo Curious podcast. Your map to the mystical, your key to the sacred, and your guide back home to yourself. I'm Eileen, a writer, a spiritual coach, energy healer, and slow living witch. This podcast is your invitation to explore a world where the mundane and the sacred intertwine. It's a haven for those ready to take the first steps into the realms of magic and mystery, providing a safe space for you to embark on your own enchanted journey towards healing and self-discovery. Here, I'll unveil the whispers of the mystical, the rituals often hidden in plain sight, and I'll engage in sacred conversation intended to stir your soul and lead you back into your power. I'm all about demystifying woo and witchcraft. So, whether you're a seasoned seeker or simply woo curious, I'm so delighted you've decided to join me on this journey. Let's make magic. Hello, Woo Crew, and welcome back to another episode of the Woo Curious podcast. I am your host, Eileen, and I'm here today with a solo episode once again. Apologies for not dropping into your ears last week. The week was full and I didn't have space to record, and so I just trust that those of you who love to be here with me weekly were able to go back and listen to some earlier episodes, perhaps before you were along for the journey, or that you took that time you would usually be sitting with me as a moment for spaciousness and rest and stillness, perhaps. If you are listening to this on Monday, the 3rd of March, then you still have a day and a bit, 36 hours or so, to decide to join us inside of Unleash Your Inner Witch. I am just always so excited to drop into this space. This 6-week live course really is foundational for all of the work that I do in the world. As you would have heard 2 weeks back, if you listened to my conversation with Sheena, when I asked her to describe in 3 words what this course felt like for her, she asked if she could use 2 instead. And she said, coming home. And I couldn't be more humbled and honored to hear that, because all of the work that I do, everything that I share with you here on this podcast, everything that I do inside of my paid containers is all with the desire to help guide you back home to yourself, to your body, to your relationship with her infinite wisdom and her cycles, to the earth and her infinite wisdom and cycles and ebbs and flows of energies, home to sisterhood and connection and a remembering of our innate interconnectedness with every other living and non-living being on this earth, in this more than human world. So if you are curious, if you have questions, please don't hesitate to send me a message either over on Instagram at I am Eileen March. You can leave a comment below this video if you're watching on YouTube. You can leave a comment on Spotify if you're listening there. You can send me an email, Eileen@MyLuminous or if you know this is the space that you want to be held within, you can simply head on over to my website, myluminouslife.ca/Unleash Your Inner Witch. There's hyphens between all those, but there's a drop-down menu on the main page as well under Work With Me that'll take you right to that page, and you can sign up to join us. I'd love to have you. Also coming up, I'm just going to briefly mention, is Bloom. It's a free week. It's 5 days of live facilitation, guided journeying to help you step into your inner power. I ran this last year as well and really had beautiful, beautiful feedback from that. So link's going to be below in the show notes. For both of these offers things, if you're not ready to jump into Unleash, I invite you certainly into Bloom, which is absolutely free. And yeah, I'm really excited to start talking about that a little bit more next week. But today, the theme of self-forgiveness is in my mind. And it's actually been here since last week. I was hoping to drop in to record this for you last week. And as I said, it didn't happen. And I forgive myself for that. It would be rather counterintuitive to be beating myself up for not having the time and space to drop in and share this with you here, especially when this is the theme that is wanting to come up. And the reason that it's surfacing is because of some of my one-on-one client work and the conversations that we're having in those spaces inside of the WhatsApp support that I provide, inside of our one-on-one calls that we do. Just this theme of self-exploration, of unpacking our stories, of understanding ourselves more deeply, and of finding ways to bring forgiveness for our past mistakes, for our quote-unquote failures, for the shitty things that we've done to others and to ourselves. As with so many things in our lives, we tend to hold ourselves to standards that we would never hold others to. And it tends to be a lot harder to find self-compassion and grace and that empathy and spaciousness around our own ways of being and showing up and working and all the things we do and are in the world than it is for us to find that same compassion and forgiveness and understanding and empathy for others, right? One of the oldest, well, maybe I don't know if it's old or not, but one of the foundational life coaching hacks, tricks, practices that we often use is, that question, what would you say to a friend who was in this situation? What would you say to a dear friend who was exhausted and feeling like a failure because she wasn't able to keep all the balls in the air anymore? What would you say to a friend who snapped at her mom and was really nasty in a moment of exhaustion and feeling like all her buttons were being pushed? What would you say to a friend who made a choice that was ethically questionable and has deep shame and guilt and regret around it? We are not perfect humans. None of us are. I guarantee that every one of you listening, myself included, we've all done shitty things that we are not proud of. We've all done things that have hurt other people, whether or not it's been intentional that hurt has been caused. We've all done things that we require forgiveness for. I once had a session with a really wise and beautiful healer, witchy, wild woman. Her name's Trika Amanita. She's here in Calgary. If you are here in Calgary and ever get the chance to work with her in some capacity, she is a beautiful soul. She co-hosts the fire walks that I've attended with my mentor Nadine, who you may have heard me speak about if you've been here for a while. But she used to have a float studio in her home. I'm really sad that it doesn't exist anymore, and I understand why it doesn't, but it was this magical space where you would go and you would have your hour or hour and a half of floating in the sensory deprivation tank, but you'd also have the whole morning or afternoon in this space called the forest with 2 R's, forest. And there were books there to explore astrology and intuition. There were cards, there were crystals, there were, feathers, there was herbs to burn. There was everything you would need to have ceremony for oneself. And if you wanted, she would facilitate some of that growth, letting go, opening, intuition ceremony, whatever it was you needed. And I went to her and I was really struggling to forgive myself and to move past something that I had done and chosen to do, with the conscious knowledge that it was straying into the territory of very much being not aligned with my ethics. I knew that somebody could get hurt if I did it, and I did it anyways because I was feeling selfish. And from my vantage point now, I regret the harm I caused, and I know that whole experience was needed for my personal growth and journey. And I still feel sorry for the harm I caused, certainly. But in this moment with Trika, sitting there, not knowing how to forgive myself, how to let go of the guilt and the shame I was carrying, she said something so profound to me that I want to share with you. Because almost never are we making decisions in a vacuum, right? We do not live in isolation. There are other people who are intertwined with our story, whose own actions influence and impact us. We are becoming with constantly. We are always in a becoming with. We are never becoming alone. And she said to me that it was okay for me to give the responsibility that belonged to the other parties in this situation back to them. That the entirety of the weight of the situation, of the guilt, of the blame, of the wrongdoing did not rest on my shoulders alone. And that it was time for me to release what didn't belong to me so that they could hold their own burdens and I could begin to do the work of forgiving the part of it that I was responsible for. And so I felt really called to share that with you today because it was so profound for me to recognize that as a woman, as a care provider, as a people pleaser, didn't use those terms at that point, but that's what it was, as a good girl, I was shouldering the entirety of all of the responsibility for this situation that I had found myself in and co-created. And it wasn't all mine. I wasn't entirely to blame. Yes, I had some responsibility, but I didn't have all of the responsibility. Much like when I would go to a party with my ex-husband, I didn't actually have the responsibility of managing his emotions and the reactions of the other people at the party to him and his emotional responses, but I felt like I did, right? We so often shoulder so much more responsibility and ownership of things that truly do not belong to us. So if you're feeling like you're in a spiral of any kind of shame or blame or guilt, if you're feeling like you have the weight of the world on your shoulders and you're tired and you want really desperately, or maybe not desperately, but you really desire to find some softness, some ease, some forgiveness, I hope that you can find a little bit of solace or permission to give yourself that forgiveness from this story. And I know I'm being a little bit cryptic because I'm not sharing all the details of the story because it is my story. It's personal, it's sensitive, and I know that nobody listening to this podcast is like, well, why won't you tell us, Eileen? However, there is that overlying message there that I know can be applicable in so many situations. And so self-forgiveness is absolutely imperative if we are going to grow from our past mistakes and hurts. When we carry the burden of guilt and shame especially, it's impossible for us to move forward and flourish. We find ourselves constantly denying ourselves pleasure or making the decision that will move us forward or taking the opportunity because we don't feel worthy of it, right? This all ties back into that worthiness feeling or peace. If you've been with me since last year, you'll know that was the theme of the free week I offer in the fall called Root, which is a guided journey to step into your worth. We have different themes for different seasons around here, as always, but when we don't feel worthy of love, of care, of the raise, of the new position, of having our feelings validated or our needs met, right? When we feel like we don't deserve a good and loving relationship because we've broken someone's heart, perhaps, we prevent ourselves from creating a life that is truly a joy to live. And I'm here to tell you that you are innately worthy of joy, of ease, of rest, of love, of understanding, of compassion, no matter what you have done. We can atone, we can mess up, we can feel guilty, and rightly so. Guilt is an indicator that we've done something wrong, and the thing that you have done is not what indicates whether or not you're a good person. It's how you decide to move forward once you recognize the wrong. Do you feel genuinely sorry? Do you make amends in whatever way the situation calls for? Do you learn from it so that you don't repeat the same mistake again? Or hopefully not very many times. The bigger the wrong, hopefully the less likely you are to repeat it. Sometimes those smaller ones we have to do a few times before we learn the lesson deeply. But each time we find ourselves in a situation where self-forgiveness is required, we are in a situation where we have an opportunity to grow and to model what it looks like to be an imperfect human, making amends imperfectly. It takes a lot of courage to admit to the world that you've done wrong. It's scary because it feels like everyone out there is judging us or judging you, right? Blaming, shaming, and some people will. And the ones who do tend to have the most proverbial skeletons in their closet, right? Those who shame or blame you for your errors when you are genuinely sorry for them are the ones who can't find forgiveness for their own errors, right? People's responses to you, your behaviors, your actions, your words are always a commentary on their own internal landscape and past and story and history, and never an objective commentary on you and your experiences and words and actions and behaviors. So I hope that this meandering, as always, line of thought feels helpful to you. As we move into the spring energies, it feels important to be able to forgive ourselves and others so that we may move forward into the burgeoning energies of spring with lightness and ease and a readiness to try again and to do better. You know, that saying, we do the best we can with what we have, and it's so, so true. And our mistakes are truly a way of bettering ourselves, an opportunity to grow more into a person who moves in the world with harmlessness and compassion at the forefront. And these are my guiding principles. They are the divine feminine principles that I attempt to bring into all aspects of my life and my interactions with others. And I do it imperfectly. As will you, especially when you are on this journey in the first few steps of the journey, at the early stages of it. But even if you are, years along this path, we all can slip and mess up and do things that we regret. We can hurt people. As I say, we can hurt people, I also want to bring in something else that I see pop up for women, especially in relationship. So I have a client who had been speaking about her struggles in creating a relationship or finding a relationship in which she was loved and seen for who she was. And she'd told me a story of two people whom she'd had beautiful relationships with, but that she had broken their hearts. And I could immediately hear this guilt that had been carried forward years and years, like almost a decade in one case. And this sense, and I can't remember if she said it out loud or if it was simply that I was reading between the lines, but this sense of, do I even deserve to be loved when I've hurt someone that badly? And I immediately flashed back to my marriage once again and the deep aching desire and need to leave that place. It was toxic to me. I was literally waking up in the middle of the night, multiple nights a week, with burning heartburn that I ended up being medicated for, like prescription medication to control this absolutely horrible heartburn. And I didn't feel as though I could leave because I felt like hurting him was the cruelest thing I could do. I couldn't recognize that my own happiness was as valid as his, and that to stay with him in order not to hurt him was not okay. It was not okay because I was not okay in that relationship. And I carried guilt for things I had done and how I had behaved and the ways that I had already hurt him. I felt like I didn't deserve to leave him, deserve to find my own happiness. I felt like his happiness was more important or carried more weight than mine. And again, there's so many lines of socialization and culture coming into play here with the way that women have been raised, have been socialized to put the needs of others, the emotions of others ahead of our own as a mark or as a sign of how good we are and how worthy and how valuable and how lovable. And so again, I share this with you because looking back now, I still weep for that woman that I was trapped in that place where I was so miserable that my body was literally burning up from the inside. By the way, I've had heartburn like a handful of times since I left, going on 6 years now. And I'm not taking any medication for it. I can count on two hands the number of times heartburn has happened, and it's never been in the middle of the night, and to that extent, it's just been short little bursts here or there during the day, thankfully. And it's really obvious to me now, looking back, how much we can tolerate and how much, if we are unable to find self-forgiveness, we can punish ourselves. And punishing ourselves, it helps no one. Neither of us were happy in that relationship. I was doing no one a service by staying. All I was doing was drawing out the pain for both of us, really. Sometimes, often, the kindest thing to do is to do the thing that hurts. Because in the doing so, you open the wound, but you allow for healing to begin. In my case, that healing could have begun 4.5 years before it started. And I don't regret any of it because, again, I forgive myself for not having the tools, the skills, the knowledge, the courage to make that move. It was all part of my story and my learning and my growth. And it led me to be exactly where I am today, now talking to you in this amazing career that I never would have dreamed of at that point. So again, just giving you these stories, offering these little insights or glimmers or glimpses into my life and my journey in the hopes that you might find some resonance and some softening in your own life and journey, if that is something you're needing. If you are struggling to forgive yourself for something, for anything, reach out. I would love to hold space and support you through that. I'm happy, always happy to hop onto a call. I'll drop my link for a curiosity call or peek through the portal call into the show notes. It's amazing what we can accomplish in just 30 minutes together. And sometimes all that is required to begin the process is just to be seen, to be heard without judgment. And that is always what I offer. Okay, Woo Crew, thank you for being here with me today. Thank you for joining me on this meandering journey through self-worth, self-forgiveness. I hope that you will consider joining me inside Unleash Your Inner Witch, because it is just such a juicy, delightful space. And if that's not the time for you to join me there, then please join me in Bloom. As always, if you enjoyed this episode, if you found it useful, it helps ever so much if you like and comment on YouTube, if you rate and review over on Spotify and Apple, and of course, if you share with your friends. Thank you so very much for being here with me, and I'll talk to you again next week. Bye for now.